Hi guys, this is Miss Cortez, your biology teacher. So we are just going over our notes for this week. Just remember that you have your week 5 quizzes due over proteins and nucleic acids and your graphic organizer over macromolecules. Just make sure that you get any questions that you have about the graphic organizer to Miss Givens and she'll be able to help. Okay, so what you want to be able to accomplish from this is to be able to define homeostasis and relate this phenomena to real world situations. So, what is homeostasis? So, for multicellular organisms like us to maintain homeostasis, they have specialized cells with the ability to communicate to one another to perform tasks. So, not all the cells in your body are the same. So, your cells in your brain perform different functions than the cells in your heart versus the cells in your stomach. If we remember back when we were talking about the levels of organization, our cells make up our tissues make up our organs, and our organs make up our organ systems. So all of our organ systems serve different purposes. So your nervous system versus your digestive system versus your circulatory system are all going to perform very different tasks and have very different structures. Organ systems do the tasks necessary to maintain homeostasis in the body. So, an example of this would be our digestive system. So, with our digestive system, we have the breaking down of food to power our body. So, that is the purpose of our digestive system. So, our cells can communicate between each other by sending chemical signals. So, cells can communicate with each other through sending chemical signals. So, if you've seen the anime Cells at Work, where they have the different cells communicating with each other, it's a very good analogy to what's happening in our body with chemical signals. Okay. So other cells have receptors and they pick up the signal and allow them to make adjustments as needed. So, homeostasis is the tendency to maintain a stable, relatively constant internal environment. So, we're wanting to keep things in within certain boundaries. Okay, so all living organisms must maintain homeostasis to live. For unicellular organisms to maintain homeostasis, they must be able to grow, to respond to their environment, to transform energy, which means to be able to actively use energy. So that's getting into more of our cellular respiration, where we can take sugar, turn it into energy that we can use. And the big thing is they must be able to reproduce. So, for example, the cell membrane helps with this by keeping internal conditions stable by selectively allowing in certain substances. So, for us to maintain homeostasis, they got to do these things. A great example is the cell membrane. Remember when we were talking about lipids, our cell membrane's made of phospholipids, and with the phospholipids being hydrophobic, it doesn't let water freely flow in and out. It doesn't let other molecules freely flow in and out, and this helps maintain the stable internal conditions needed. So there is a video here that I have attached in the Google Classroom. I want you guys to watch this on your own. So with homeostasis, there's two types of feedback. There's negative feedback and positive feedback. So negative feedback counteracts changes of various properties to bring levels back to a set point that allows for homeostasis. So for example, drinking Kool-Aid. When you drink Kool-Aid, it is very, very sugary. So it increases the amount of sugar in your blood. Your blood ends up releasing insulin. Your insulin goes through a response mechanism that brings your blood sugar back down by telling your body to absorb the sugars. So, another example of this could be with sweating. Okay, so as our body temperature increases, okay, if we get too hot, as we've talked about before, we can go through having brain damage. It can eventually lead to death. So we have to have a cooling mechanism. And one of our cooling mechanisms is sweating. So we're going to go through sweating, and this will bring our body temperature back down. However, if our body temperature gets too low and we decrease it too far, even if it's in the summer, you can end up shivering because you've sweated too much. And this shivering makes your muscles quickly contract and release. This warms up your body and brings it back to a certain set point. So this is a negative feedback loop. So one thing happens, it brings it back to a set point. Another thing can happen, it brings it back to a set point. So if it goes too far in one direction, there is going to be a response that brings it back to that set point. Our positive feedback is the opposite of this. So instead of bringing it back to a set point, it's amplifying the response. So this with positive feedback, that amplifies the starting stimuli to push the reaction to completion. So, an example of this would be childbirth. So, pressure on a woman's cervix starts, and contraction after contraction ends up starting until the baby is eventually born. So, with this one, this keeps going till completion. With childbirth, you're not bringing your body back to a set point. You're amplifying this response. Contractions get stronger and stronger and stronger. So the baby can travel down the birth canal. If we were bringing it back to a set point, it would be terrifying because at a certain point, your body would suck the baby back in. And that's what's not needed. So childbirth is one of our few examples of a positive feedback. So when we think about homeostasis overall and the way that we talk about it for this class, it's going to mainly be negative feedback cycles. So this is just another example. So another example of a positive feedback would be like a positive feedback cycle for anxiety, which gets more into like the psychology side of things. But for example, like you observing a number of cattle running towards you, you have a certain overall level of panic, and that panic increases as you observe that there's more and more cows running towards you. This could be with any kind of like disastrous event that would increase anxiety over time, where it just increases, increases, increases. Okay, so overall, uh, this is pretty much it. So I hope you feel good about homeostasis.